Have you ever tried to make a straight cut with a circular saw, only to end up with a wavy mess? Well, you're not alone. But don't worry, today I'm going to show you the best tricks to make perfectly straight cuts every time without using a jig. No more guesswork, no more wasted materials, just clean, precise cuts that look professional. So let's get started. There are all sorts of jigs and straight edges that you can buy or even make to help you cut straight, perfect lines with your circular saw. And they're great tools. But what if you don't have one? If you always rely on a guide, you'll never develop the skill to cut straight with a circular saw freehand. The good news is, it doesn't take years of practice. There are just a few key things that you need to remember and learn to do, and in this video, I'll show you a few game-changing tricks that'll transform your crooked cuts into straight, professional-looking cuts every time. So whether you're using an electric saw or it could be a cordless saw, these tips are going to help you make your cuts straight every time. Now before we even start cutting, setting up your saw properly is the key. So here's what you need to do. First of all, we need to check your blade alignment. As you draw a line on a board, you need to see where that blade is going to be cutting at in comparison to the base plate that's on your saw. Now let me show you. A lot of people say to take a straight edge, put the straight edge against your blade and see where it lines up according to where your base plate. But let me show you some things you need to understand. If you place something on the blade here, you have to make sure it hits the teeth that are on this blade. Now this blade here has tungsten teeth to it, and they stick out further than what the actual metal part of the blade. So if you don't line it up with those teeth, you're already going to be cutting off the line. But here's a better way I found. If you'll take a 2x4, lower your blade down and line it up against the 2x4, then get behind there and see where that blade is touching in comparison to where your base plate is. You're going to see exactly where your saw is going to be cutting and where to hold your saw when you draw a line on the board that you're going to cut. You're going to see exactly where to hold the blade. You need to know where that blade sits in order to cut a straight line. So once you see where your blade is going to be cutting at, the next thing you need to do is adjust your blade to the right depth. Now a blade should be set out 1/8 to 1/4 inch below the surface of the board you're going to be cutting. That way you're going to reduce the resistance and make the cut a lot cleaner and a lot straighter. You'll have less tendency for it to bind when it's too deep inside the wood, and it'll save you from cutting things that are underneath the wood. Now choosing the right saw is important. Whether you're using a framing saw like this worm drive saw, or whether you're using a cordless saw like this one, either saw you can make straight cuts. Irregardless if you have either one, I'm going to show you exactly how to use it in order to cut straight, perfect lines every time. Now there's a time and place for using a guide. Now granted, if I'm doing cabinetry or if I'm doing some fine furniture building, I will use either my track saw or I'll use a table saw to cut with. That's a different story. But for the most part of what I'm cutting, if it's boards, if I'm cutting down sheet goods, or if I'm doing some rough framing, building a house, I prefer doing freehand cutting. Especially if you're using a chalk line and you're snapping lines and you have to cut out windows or whatever it is, you don't have time to set up guides or jigs or anything like that. And if you always rely on a guide, you'll never develop the skill to cut straight on your own. A freehand cut isn't just about a steady hand. It's about understanding how the saw moves. So practicing freehand cuts will improve your control and let you work more efficiently when guides aren't available. So one of the pro tips about cutting straight lines is practice. When I was younger, we used to take scrap wood, draw lines on it or snap lines on it and just practice cutting till it got to be just second nature to put your saw down and cut it straight every time. So let's do some cutting. Okay, we're going to go ahead and we'll draw our line. As we draw our line, we want to make sure, let's take for example, if our good side is going to be on the left, we're going to cut on the right side of the line. So we make our marks, draw our line with a fine pencil, set our saw up, and when you're looking at your saw, you're not only looking at the front of the base here where your blade lines up, which I like to put a little mark on it, a black mark, but you're also watching the blade. Now, a lot of guys say, oh, you don't watch the blade. I always watch the blade. When you watch your blade and you alternate back and forth from your blade and your plate and look ahead and just take slow, steady cuts, you'll see exactly where that is, and before you get too far off the line, you can do small corrections and keep it nice and straight on the line. You'll eventually get the feel of the saw. I try to use the same saws all the time. Now, I use two different types of saws. I use the worm drive saw, and I'll use this cordless. So I've got so used to these, I know exactly where all the buttons are, how it fits, where to hold it at, so you're cutting straight all the time. So a sharp blade is a must. And also you need to inspect your blades. This doesn't have the battery in, but pull back and just look at all the teeth on there, because sometimes if you ever hit a nail or something hard, one of these teeth will chip off. But always make sure that you have all the teeth, and always make sure your blade is sharp also. So a sharp blade, a steady pace, put the foam underneath your workpiece so that you have a good, solid, steady place to cut. The styrofoam will also help, so when you get to the end of your cut, it doesn't fall off, it doesn't make a big chip or a tear or crack a good piece of wood that you're cutting. And the reason for learning freehand cutting, it's because oftentimes, like in my position, when I'm going to a job site, I don't have room to carry every tool in my shop. And sometimes I'll run into a situation where I'm going to have to make a cut or do something, and I don't have time to run back to the shop to cut it or to go get my jig and bring it back and have it all set up. I just need to cut it straight, get it done, and continue on. And in certain types of cuts, like when I'm doing a lot of stair stringers or cutting different angles along a board, I like to take my saw, put it on, get it set up, and I'll look down to see where the line is, and I'll look in the back and make sure that it's not going sideways. You want to keep everything down when you're cutting the line. And that'll help you a whole lot in keeping your line straight. And always remember to use personal protection gear, which includes eyeglasses, headphones or hearing protection, and also a dust mask. And that's all it is to making perfectly straight cuts freehand. So it's time to put these tips to the test. Make sure you grab the right tools. If you don't have the right tools or you need some of these blades, I'll put product links in the description, and any tools that you need or the tools that I recommend, I'll have links to them to Amazon, or you can look at my Amazon storefront in the description, so you can pick up some of the good tools that I would recommend and use. If this video has helped you out, give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and let me know your best cutting tips in the comments. So leave me a comment down below. Let us know what your best cutting tips are and any questions you have about using a circular saw correctly. And check out some of my other videos I have. I'll put some links down in the description, and it might be just a video that you need to help you with your next project. So I'll see you in the next one. Keep building, stay safe, you take care, and God bless.